Hi, welcome back to Far From Eden. You know, for quite a while, since the beginning of feminism, which was sold to the world as equal rights and some kind of justice, right? But it's for me, in addition to a lot of things, it has been the green flag to go ahead and bash men. And they were doing it in old Hollywood. You could just say things and it's okay because it's sassy and or funny. And it's not. It's not any of those things. Men have feelings. Men get hurt. Men have hearts. Men are human, but we don't treat them like that in our society. Not at all, because we can just say things like this without repercussion. Nobody, really pushes back. Except now they're starting to.
Men are horrible. Okay? I mean, I have to just tell it to you like it is, honey, but all men are awful, really. And the key is to just find a man who's the least horrible.
Nice. Isn't that nice?
Can someone tell me why old white straight men are literally the worst genre of humans? I'm at the airport yesterday and I'm sitting in my seat minding my own business, and there's this old man next to me who then strikes up a convo with like a younger guy who's sitting across from us. And the younger guy was from Belgium, and then the older guy was from Long Beach, which makes sense. They're in a convo, totally normal. I'm like, oh, he's just a cute, nice old man. And then basically the like old dude asks the Belgium guy, like, oh, have you seen the show 60 Minutes or whatever, that old people show is? So the young guy's like, no, I have not seen that show. And then the old guy's like, oh yeah, I used to watch that all the time back in my day. And like one time I saw an episode about, I think it was about Belgium, I don't know, or some European country. And I'm thinking like, oh, he's probably just gonna say like, it's so beautiful there. No, of course that's not what he says. He instead makes it about how the women in there were so hot, or like the ladies there are so hot, and then just completely makes the combo weird and uncomfortable for everyone. And his wife is sitting there right next to him. And I'm like, man, if this was my husband, he'd be dead. He'd be dead. Then the wife made some joke of like, well, now you're getting there 60 years later, honey. And it was just, no. Can someone tell me why?
You can just say that. You can just say that as a woman with no societal repercussions. And the male loneliness epidemic, the touch starvation that so many of them are experiencing. On one hand, you're told, show your emotions. On the other hand, you're told to be quiet and that none of your emotions are valid, they don't matter, etc. So what's being done? Like, what's the progress, right? It's getting somewhere, because at least now the internet is creating a space for men. It's creating a place where they can go and see that they're not the only ones, right? And also, I will say, when I was looking at TikTok and perusing all the man hate out there, there was a lot of women standing up for men's rights and standing against the hatred towards men. I'm not saying it's safe to marry. I'm not saying that. And I'm not saying we've all turned into, good wives. But I'm glad that women are seeing how their fathers have been treated, how their brothers have been treated. And sometimes if the woman's in a relationship, they're seeing how the man they're with has been treated in the past. So that is helping to red pill some women. Still light years away from where I think we should be. Time magazine. We talked yesterday about Newsweek and how that was one of the magazines that was always on the coffee table. One of the magazines my dad read. It was always Newsweek, US News and World Report, and Time. Those three magazines were just always there. And I always remember him reading them. I paid attention to those sorts of things. And furthermore, that lady was talking about 60 Minutes. My dad watched 60 Minutes every Sunday. Now, that was before so many people knew how biased, well, that's putting it lightly, the media is. You know, from Fox News to MSNBC and everything in between, it's all been propaganda. I look at those news reporters now, and all I see is like an actor or a kind of CIA agent working on behalf of all those interests, pro-war, you know, anti-man, all those sorts of things. They always push those things to the front. So just absolutely can't trust them. But back in the day, nobody really knew much better. And so that was another magazine. But a couple of days ago, December 12th, Time magazine had an article called "The Debate About Whether Men Have Been Left Behind is Decades Old." Indeed, because that's how long they've been being pushed behind, you know, in the name of justice, in the name of equality for women, all those things. Such a lie. Sameness is not equality. Trying to turn women into men is not equality. It's a hoax. But anyway, this article is written by Teresa Iker, I-K-E-R, and December 12th, 2024. Donald Trump's success with men, especially Latino men and young white men, has caused hand-wringing among Democrats. Yay. Some have charged that the party has abandoned male interests or even taken to treating men derisively, with disastrous consequences. Disastrous consequences. Is she showing her bias at all? Maybe. According to John Della Volpe, director of polling at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, these men are not radicals or incels. They are your sons, or they're your neighbor's sons. He told the BBC in late October. Many support equality for women, but they also feel their own concerns go unheard. The critique is a continuation of a narrative that developed during the campaign. Commentators asserted that men's loneliness, disillusionment, declining educational outcomes, under and unemployment, and feelings of abandonment by Democrats were driving them toward Trump, the GOP, and an almost caricatured vision of masculinity embodied by pro wrestler Hulk Hogan and UFC's Dana White. Oh, that's a caricatured vision of masculinity, is it? Who says? Women? They cannot say anything without it being an insult. Yet, while there is evidence to support some of these claims, it's necessary to trace the discussion about marginalized men back to its roots. I would argue that its roots are the truth. So she's saying the roots are the men's rights movement. For over 60 years, its activists have argued that men have drawn the short end of the stick, thanks in large part to what they characterize as feminist movements that purport to fight for gender equality, but instead actually prioritize women over men. True story. Understanding the links between the men's rights movement and the current fixation on disillusioned young men is critical because men's rights activists have used many of these claims to advance a political agenda that attempts to hold girls and women back. How? How does it attempt to hold girls and women back? If you're so strong and independent and you're so equal, right? Why would you need that? You know, here's the thing. If women are so brilliant and, you know, on this in the same ways men are, then how was the patriarchy ever able to dominate them in the first place? I think that's a good question. You know, if you're so everything, you're just as physically strong, you're just as smart, you're just as capable, you're just as competent. How on earth could you ever have been oppressed? Why didn't you just overthrow that immediately? Is it because women, you're just too benevolent to do such a thing? And men are just that evil? No. It's because we are not supposed to be competing with each other about what we're both good at, right? I mean, men aren't trying to be women for the most, well, I shouldn't say that, but you know what I'm saying. Like, generally speaking, they're not trying to compete with women. But women are hell-bent on competing with men. And guess what? It's embarrassing.
Love women so much, honestly. They are just the best. I'm sorry, men. Just women are they're the better sex. I'm sorry, it's just facts. Without us, there would be no mankind. And I know you can argue, obviously, it takes two to tango, but you're not carrying a baby. That's our stop. Anyway, that is like literally beside the point. I just wanted to say.
But they're not. The birth rates are plummeting. And I thought that was oppression. How can you say, oh, you're so much better because of this one thing, but you're not doing that one thing? You're not actually celebrating that one thing. Actually, you're tearing down women who are choosing to be mothers, who are choosing to raise their children and not, you know, have daycare or the government schools raise them. But let's just go ahead, because guess what? Now that women are in the workforce and, you know, playing competitive sports, it's much more obvious. It was one thing when they were just, you know, wiggling their signs and like, we're just so oppressed and we need to be in the workforce and all the rest of it, right? And they could say, hey, we'd be just as good. We'd be the top engineers. We'd be the rocket scientists. We'd be the, you know, top neurosurgeons. But guess what? It's been decades and we're still not, because we're just not. That is not where we shine, because we're women. But the competitiveness is only coming from one side.
I was talking to the lady. We got talking about how I moved up here. And I was like, look, life's a bit all over the shop, doll. I just got out of a 5-year relationship. I've always been a man hater, but I really am in my era where I just can't even. And then she's like, doll, me too. And she basically insinuated, I wasn't going to ask, but it was very clear that she got cheated on. Her and her ex broke up in November, and he's literally moved straight in to his new girlfriend's house. That's how I knew that obviously she got cheated on, because there was obviously a crossover. But anyway, the reason I love women is because she just said,
Women never have the plan B, right? There's some crazy statistic about how many women have a like plan B lined up already while they're in a relationship. But okay, let's just go ahead and make up a story and talk about how, of course, you cheated, because that's always the thing. But when you look at it, it's not quite that way, is it? Same with assault in the home, DV. It's coming out that it's much more female, but we'll get to that in our article in just one second.
the funniest thing. I was like, oh, that must be really hard. Like, you've got to look after the kids and you've got no one around to help you. And she goes, oh no, he was FIFO, so there's not really much difference. He was never around anyway. The only difference is I don't have his fat ass sitting on my couch anymore. And I was like, girl, I've never felt somebody so strong. I just felt like that was such an accurate depiction of, no offense, but like, it's how everyone envisions FIFO workers to be, you know? And I was like, so girl, what are you going to do, like, living here? You're now in your, like, hot single era. And she's like, I don't know, there's literally nothing to do in this town. I was like, yeah, that's why I'm here, so that I can start this business and get going. I'm really sorry if you thought that this story was going to go somewhere. That was never the plan. I just wanted to come on here and express how much I love women because, I mean, I think it's very clear from my profile as it is, but I'm self-proclaimed the queen of the females. I'm the most queen of the females that you can be if you're not a feminist, you know? I'm queen of the girls, girl. Look, put it this way. If there was a club for women that don't get along with men, I would be the president of it. That's all I'm saying. And with that, I bid you good day.
Okay, then. Well, I think we all know how that is going to end up. Kevin Samuels said it best. Buy a dog, die alone. Speaking of which, if you're enjoying this video, please hit that like button. I have a little dog myself, and to me, it's hilarious because of the Kevin Samuels Buy a Dog, Die Alone. She is the last of a bunch of farm dogs. She's not quite a farm dog. Anyway, she's a bit of an inside joke on the channel, I think. And most of us love her. Okay, so we were talking about disillusioned young men and the competitiveness about how that claiming those things, claiming that you all are suffering at all, is just designed to hold women and girls back. Empty accusations, empty everything, just like that woman we just watched. The men's rights movement began spreading across the country in the early 1960s in response to what activists saw as a, quote, divorce racket that fleeced men and coddled women. Their complaints ignored the reality of divorce at the time. The restrictive, fault-based system limited access to divorce, and structural inequalities like unequal pay and pink-collar professions made it impossible for women to support themselves and their children after their marriages ended. Nobody was prohibiting them from going to college. Nobody was prohibiting that. Most women just didn't want to. So many lies. So many lies. I would say lies to hold men and boys back. Nonetheless, men's rights activists bemoaned how family courts, as well as usually granting them custody of children, and with it, child support payments. Okay, that didn't make any sense. Okay, let's go back. So it's impossible for them to support themselves after their marriages ended. Nonetheless, men's rights activists bemoaned how family courts awarded women alimony at the expense of their ex-husbands, as well as usually granting them custody of children, and with it, child support payments. Thanks to decades-old presumptions that mothers were the more nurturing parents, particularly for younger children, right? The tender years doctrine, the bullcrap tender years doctrine that came out of England during the Victorian era to say that women are just better when the children are younger. And that might be true. However, I have a very controversial viewpoint on that. I think it's true when there's a man at the head providing the structure and the environment where that can be true. I don't think it's true where there's just a mother in the house and children. And I would say the stats prove it. Have you seen the little kids? Have you seen how unmannerly they are? How unkempt they are? This whole thing about the tender years doctrine is baloney. This anger spawned men's rights groups like the pertinently named Divorce Racket Busters. Founded in 1960 in Sacramento, and the American Society of Divorced Men, pointedly using the dollar sign in its name to emphasize men's perceived financial exploitation. It absolutely is financial exploitation of men. And you know what? A lot of you in the comments have said it's distribution of wealth. Absolutely. They're taking from the man. The man works harder at a harder profession that requires more competency, more intelligence, harder physical labor. He's doing all those things, right? And they are fleecing him. And when I say they, I mean the overlords, the state. The state benefits off of child support. The state benefits off of, more court time. Those judges, those attorneys, all of that, they all get paid. Divorce is good business for the state. And the overlords are loving the breakup of the nuclear family. So yeah, they want a divorce to be easier. And they want to take the money from the men. I guess your taxes just aren't enough anymore. These organizations convened to fight against divorce laws and provide emotional support for men, as well as connecting them with sympathetic attorneys willing to fight for the male interest. I just love how they put those in quotations. Male interest doesn't need quotations unless you don't take it seriously. Fight for the male interest in court, much like the practice of consciousness raising occurring in feminist circles during the same years. Early men's rights organizations offered social connection and a sense of political purpose to their members. Yeah, and notice how widespread hormonal birth control, legal abortion, that happened in 1973. No-fault divorce was 1969. Late 60s was the pill. These men's rights organizations that came out in the early 60s were trying to stop this wave of evil that has disrupted all of society. They were trying to put a stop to it, and they were called angry, trying to hold women and girls back. Nothing of the sort. Nothing of the sort. They were trying to stop families from breaking up. They were trying to stand up for themselves. They were trying not to have their children taken from them. But you can see how those things were put a stop to. You didn't see that on 60 Minutes. Was Time Magazine talking about it then? No, nobody gave a voice to it because it doesn't serve the leftist interests that have been trying to take over, I would say definitely since, in the 20th century, and probably you can look at before. Oh boy. Through these gatherings, a broader argument began cohering. Men face systematic and fundamental discrimination in a changing world. This belief enabled aggrieved men to see themselves as a class and a constituency for the first time. Yeah, because men don't think that way. Men don't think your group and my group and this group. While some of them yearned to turn back the clock, most men's rights activists wanted to advance a new gender order, one that borrowed selectively from the burgeoning second wave women's liberation movement. If women wanted true equality, these men believed, including the right to leave their marriages, work in male-dominated industries, and earn equal pay, then they should also stand on their own 2 feet at the end of marriages. If women were getting less pay, then why didn't companies just hire a bunch of women? Companies are in the business of making money. They don't care about the rest of it. So why didn't they just hire a bunch of women? It's a great question, isn't it? I think that it proves that all this is baloney, this equal pay argument. Never been a thing. Not the way they say it. Yeah, a secretary is not going to make as much as the CEO. That's just the case. And if you were going to be a better CEO and make the company more money, they would make you CEO. That's just how it goes. Women need DEI to advance to these levels because they're not as competent as men in these. It's just the way it is. And women hate that because at the end of the day, they're competitive. Some in the men's rights movement claim that just as women suffered from caricatured ideas about femininity and sexuality, so too did people mistreat and objectify men because of outdated conceptions of masculinity. For every female sex object diminished because of stereotypes, there was a male success object expected to excel at work, stifle his emotions, and financially support his wife and children. Feminist reforms that prioritized girls and women, such activists argued, ignored the plight of modern men. And here's my controversial take. This is why I think the men's rights movement and the way they went about this for men's rights, this is why I think it failed. Because so many of them were like, okay, yes, I agree. Let's do egalitarianism. Let's do that. And that was based on the premise that that's what women were wanting, that women were coming at this with good faith. And that was a reason why it failed. The other reason why it failed is that that doesn't work. And I don't think most men want that. I think men, for the most part, maybe not the younger men now because of everything, the way the society's been, but that most men would rather have a wife. They don't want another dude. They don't want a partner that's just going to do the same thing they do and be a roommate that they have hanky-panky with. By and large, that's not what men wanted. So it didn't have the power. And here's the other thing. I do believe that women are women and men are men, and we have roles, and the family is important and is the building block of society. And you can't have a family without acknowledging those roles. Families break apart or they never get started when you don't have those roles. And the men's rights movement doesn't look at it that way. The men's rights movement has been primarily, it's been a secular movement, not acknowledging God, not acknowledging roles, not acknowledging that men are stronger and more capable at certain things. They want to say we're kind of the same. And that is not rooted in truth. When you're not rooted in truth, this is what you get. That's what I think. It's made me unpopular in certain circles, but I'd rather, whatever anguish of spirit it may cause, I'm willing to know the whole truth. Figures like Farrell. Did we already talk about Warren Farrell? No, we're just going to start right in. Figures like Farrell did admit that a power imbalance existed between men and women, and that misogyny had enduring and deleterious. Okay, Rojas, what is this word? Enduring and deleterious effects. Yet they claim that women discriminated against men just as much as men oppressed women. And worse, that this misandrist treatment was normalized by family courts and the wider culture. The problem was admitting the misogyny in the first place. Perhaps surprisingly, during the 1970s, these activists became enthusiastic promoters of the Equal Rights Amendment, which prohibited denying equality of rights under the law on account of sex. Second-wave feminists fought hard for the ERA, viewing it as a legal shortcut for achieving women's equality. Men's rights activists had similar ideas, except they wanted to level the playing field for what they saw as marginalized men. In their view, the ERA would abolish alimony and men's disproportionate child support payments. And as well it should. Isn't it funny, though, that the ERA has never passed? To me, that it says so much. It's like they don't really want equality. They want privilege all day long. Perhaps most importantly, men's rights activists believed something primarily promoted by ERA opponents like Phyllis Schlafly, that the amendment would force women to serve in the military, a hypothetical and alarmist position, given that the draft had ended in 1973. I'm sorry, but the draft can pop up anytime. Anytime the overlords decide, oh, we need to go to war. Like what, with Iran? Like Russia? Like anywhere in the Middle East? Like that, they can just go, okay, go on. 18 to 25-year-old dudes, ship off. They can do that. This generation is so detached from the very real threat of the draft. And of course, I think we should protect our homeland. However, I'm sick and tired of the overlords telling us that we got to go fight like on the other side of the world because somehow that protects our safety over here. They tried that for a very long time, and a lot of us bought into it. And then now we're like, wait a second. I don't think you're telling us the truth, because they're not. So yeah, they can call you up at any time, but they can't call up the women. Equal rights, equal lefts. They argued that the all-male draft had been an unfair outrage perpetuated on men, one so grievous that men's rights leader Fred Hayward equated it with grape in 1981. Well, I mean, you're taking the dude's body. It's pretty bad. As the feminist movement made gains, men's rights activists began asserting that the political spotlight on violence against women was leading to false accusations of workplace sexual harassment, SA, and DV, something they hoped the ERA would correct. They argued that these claims ruined the lives of individual men and vilified masculinity as violent and predatory. Yes, amen. That's exactly what happens. They imagined that the ERA's passage would lead to equal punishments for male and female wrongdoers in the workplace. Such wrongdoing, they believed, should not only account for male sexual harassment and assault, but also punish women for displaying sexuality through application of makeup, mode of dress, and exposure of sexually alluring body parts. Now could you imagine if they're like, if you're going to be in the workforce, makeup just doesn't make any sense. And it's true. Think about it. I mean, blush is on your cheeks. It's like flushing. Lips are darker. It's all to sort of simulate what a woman looks like in more like hanky-panky. It does accentuate our features and stuff, but for what purpose? To attract. And how is that appropriate when, you're a nurse or a teacher? It's not. And particularly revealing clothing is insane. Can you imagine if men did that? If men, women show cleavage, could you imagine if men just showed like a little bit of their part, their member, which is like, oh, it's just the side. Like, that's insane. You never do that. Women wearing leggings, for example. Imagine men walking around in leggings. Now, we're getting closer to that. We see a lot of people dressed up, but we don't see that, in the boardroom. But you might see cleavage in the boardroom. So they have a good point. If you want to be men, you want to be taken seriously and compete with men, then go do it. Go do it on that playing field. Don't use your sexuality to advance yourself. Kamala Harris. Even after the ERA ratification deadline expired in 1982, some men's rights activists kept hope alive, attempting to resuscitate it, paralleling the efforts among some feminists. Yeah, it's just fighting. Most men's rights activists, however, turned their attention to laws at the state and local level during the 1980s and 1990s, along with academic understandings of gender violence. Increasingly, they falsely claimed that men, not women, were the primary victims of domestic violence. I think that's probably true. With the support of sociologists Marie Strauss and Richard Gels, activists inaccurately proclaim that politicizing battered wives distracted from the problem of family violence that included a high proportion of male victims. Absolutely, it does. It does. More broadly, men's rights activists began pointing to a long list of poor outcomes affecting boys and men as proof that men were the ones being discriminated against. The claims span from lower rates of attainment in higher education and white-collar professions to higher proportions of mental health struggles and, quote, deaths of despair, including ending themselves and drug overdoses. Most of these efforts received scant attention, and men's rights activists achieved relatively little well into the 21st century. Yet, the era of social media and podcasts has expanded their reach in ways their forebears could only have dreamed of. I'm so grateful for that. They've also latched onto Trump as a defender of men's rights while cheering the misogynistic mockery of his two female opponents, Hillary Clinton in 2016 and Kamala Harris in 2024. Don't you know you're not allowed to criticize women? I've shown you examples, just a few examples of how women can just criticize men all day long, and that's fine. That's somehow fine. But you can't even say something bad about Hillary Clinton or something bad about Kamala Harris without it being something bad about women. Maybe it's just bad about that particular woman. That you're not allowed to criticize them. The result is that the central premise of the men's rights movement, that boys and men are being left behind, has gone mainstream. A movement's longer history has largely escaped notice, but it provides crucial context for the burgeoning debate about whether poor outcomes and private struggles are changing the politics of young men. Men's rights activists have long made many similar claims that they've used them to push dangerous and radical solutions which would harm girls and women in the name of fairness to men. How is it going to harm? Again, they're saying this again. How is it going to harm girls and women? Are you going to tell us? Probably not. Oh, they're going to try. For example, men's rights activists have argued for abolishing the Violence Against Women Act, which they claim discriminates against male victims. It does. It does. I've gotten the little paper. When I moved into my apartment, that you get the paper, the Violence Against Women Act, and all the rights you have. And when I got it, of course, I was like, why isn't this violence against people? Why? It is so sexist. Why is it just women that are so protected? Huh? Don't know. They can't explain that. They've gone so far as to sue state services to help female victims in Minnesota, California, Maine, and West Virginia, efforts that drain already overburdened agencies of their limited time and resources. Maybe they're overburdened because of all the false accusations. You guys know that. It's right and left, especially within a divorce proceeding. As Terrence Popp says all the time, it's a silver bullet. You know, just claim abuse, and then you're going to get custody, so then you're going to get higher child support, then you're going to get a free attorney. You get rewarded for making accusations, and you never ever have to file criminally. You never ever have to really prove it. You just need a simp judge or some feminist judge that just agrees, well, yeah, it's a dude, so he probably did it. That's literally what happens in family court. Oh, he's a man, so he probably did the bad thing that you're saying he did. So they go ahead and adjudicate with that in mind. Some men's rights activists have even pushed for men having an equal say in cases of deleting the deletus the fetus. I still can't say it smoothly because it's so angry. So even having an equal say in that and adoption, which would give them control over women's bodies. No, it would give them control of their offspring. Their offspring. There's a reason why for centuries the children have the father's last name. Those are his kids. They're his kids. That's his offspring. That's his legacy. Some longtime men's rights fantasies about overturning no-fault divorce without reinstating men's historic alimony obligations have even made their way into conservative reform efforts in red states like Texas, Louisiana, and Oklahoma. All right, let's all move to there. I hope they do overturn no-fault divorce. If you get marriage is marriage. As long as you have divorce, it's not marriage. And I know some of you say, well, it will just increase accusations. Really? No, it would require proof because no fault. You got to show it. You got to show the fault. If you're enjoying this video, please hit the like button. My little doggy Lola is insisting on her dinner, so she's trying to make all kinds of racket. Understanding this history is the key to enabling Democrats and the media to address the alienation of young men and their drift rightward without unwittingly empowering this movement. Oh, you better not. Don't you dare empower this movement. I'm being sarcastic. One that wants to restore men's rights. They have it in quotations, like as if it would be like, can you believe that's even a thing? To unearned legal privileges. I'm sorry. If you've built society and you keep it running, you've earned those privileges. Unfair economic and educational advantages. How? What's their economic advantage? That they're smarter than us, that they're more capable, that they're more competent? That's just nature, okay? Women need to stop being mad about it because that's not going to change it. And quite literally to women's bodies. No. And that was the end of that. You're just going to end it with that because that's what men want, right? As soon as men speak up for their rights and what's unfair to them, they're trying to hurt women. They're trying to harm them. They're trying to control their bodies. It's absolutely insane. But the good news is people know about it now. And women are learning about it now. They're seeing men they care about get absolutely treated like second-class citizens. That's how I got here. That's how I got here. I grew up seeing it, didn't quite recognize the extent, obviously, the macro of it all. But you get perspective as you get older. You realize you're lied to by society, lied to in school about what equal rights really means, about what freedom for women really means. It does mean oppressing men. It does mean holding them down. Imagine there's a man and a woman and they're going to run a foot race, right? And we all know the majority of men are going to be faster than women. And women don't like that. So they're just making the man like run through, 2 feet of mud. And they're giving the woman like 20 feet head start in the 100-meter race or something. That's what you have to do for women to compete as men. You have to push men down because men are designed to be in the workforce. Men are designed to run society. They're designed to do those things. Nature made it that way. And I think that's where the men's rights movement has kind of stuttered because it denies God's order. And they seem to think that if men are the ones that protect and provide, that that's somehow unfair to the men. And I can understand that if the women aren't bringing anything to the table. If the women aren't having the babies and schooling the babies and raising the babies and honoring their husband, respecting their husband, taking care. If that's not happening, I can see where they would say, well, it's not fair to expect the man to protect and provide. But that's the same as the feminist argument. It's just like, let's all be the same and let's ignore the way we're made, God's order, nature's order. And that's not going to work. What's going to work is fighting for the truth and what's real. And that is finally what's coming out. That's why you have things like Ballerina Farm, the Mormon lady who's got, what does she have? 6 kids. and she lives on a farm and she's happy. We're going to have more people like that speaking out or just even being, part of the social landscape. It's harder for them to hide it now. They could do it in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. It was a lot easier to hide it. It was a lot easier to hide what's going on in family court. Now it's all over YouTube. Now we can see the unfairness. Now we can see what the mothers are demanding. Now we can see how the mothers are accusing. And that's good because sunlight is the best disinfectant. Just remember, as bad as it is, you're made in God's image. And this isn't all there is. It should never have been this way. I think how we got here is because men are actually the opposite of what they're accused of. Most men are good. Most men have big hearts. And they never, ever saw this coming. They never, ever thought that women would want to tear them down like this. They never, ever thought that if they granted no-fault divorce, that women would abuse it in the way that they do. I just think they just had no idea. I think they believed that we are sugar and spice and all things nice. And you can see that in the boomers. You can see it in the silent generation. That's why they were kind of letting the women walk all over them and giving, you can work or you can stay at home, either one. They kind of simped their way into it. And I'm not trying to blame them. I'm trying to say that men are actually very generous and very loving, and they trusted women too much. And that's how we got here. And that and the overlords pushing it so that it, weakens us. So in the end, we win because Christ is king. In the meantime, make sure to protect your peace because nobody else is going to. Feed your souls because nobody else is going to. And you're worth it. I'm so sorry for the way society has devolved and the way that the target has been on your backs. But it's because you're the thing standing in the way of, the state being in complete control, complete authoritarianism. I love you guys. I'll see you on the next one.